Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, back once again to talk about the Iowa State Cyclone football program here on Tuesday night, 7 Central. We're going to start a series this week that you'll see a lot of from a lot of the Voice of College Football Network channels throughout the offseason. We're just going to start ours now. And it's kind of a state of the program. And we're going to go through kind of each position group and talk about any departures that left, any major departures that left, the projected starters, projected depth pieces, any new people that just come in, and we'll also take a look at recruiting and what they're targeting for the 2026, what they're targeting for the 2026 class so far at that position. We'll go through each position group one by one, starting today with the quarterbacks and the running backs, which I think are two very interesting. Interesting in certain ways, and honestly, frankly, a little bit boring in some ways too, because there's really not a lot of controversy at either of these position groups going into 2025. So first off, I want to thank everybody that is tuning in right now. Again, had kind of a bad luck, string of bad luck here as far as scheduling these shows, just because of Iowa State basketball also playing on Tuesday nights and things like that. So I know people are preoccupied with that, and I certainly do not blame them for watching a top 10 basketball team on Tuesday instead of, watching a football stream in March. But either way, I appreciate any Cyclone fans that are able to tune in live, and especially tune in later. And I also really appreciate any non-Iowa State fans that are tuning in. If this is your first time coming to the show, welcome. I'm hoping that any non-Iowa State fans that are watching the show, hopefully by the time we get to the 2025 season, by the time we get to August, I'm hoping that I've convinced you that Iowa State should be your second favorite football team, because this is going to be a good football team that is going to have a good shot to compete for a Big 12 title, and is one of the real true up and coming programs in college football right now. That does not appear to just be a flash in the pan, just for a couple of years or 1 year, a couple of years, whatever it is. I talked about it with Mark Rogers a little bit last week, when he came on the show towards the end, about how it's not very often in college football anymore that we get to see a program truly rise from nothing, rise from the ashes, if you will, rise from the dirt, and become a consistent winner on a yearly basis. We don't really get to see that often. More often we've seen teams fall down from being consistent winners to being sporadic winners, or to just being bad football programs. But if you think about the really high end, consistently winning football programs right now, most of them have been winning for a long time, or this is not their first time being a winning program. If you think, obviously, all the blue bloods, most of them had their come up in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, long time ago, back when when color TV wasn't an option. And so they've just been good for as long as any of us can remember, really. And even you look at some other programs, like Oregon has been good for a couple decades. Clemson's been good for decades. Miami was, they got good in the 80s. Florida State's the same way. Notre Dame was a run for a long time, then they were down for a bit. Now they're back up again. There's most of our consistent winners in college football are old winners. They're old money. If you're a fan of the book, The Great Gatsby, they are East Egg. They are the old money. And I'm certainly not implying that Iowa State is West Egg in this situation, that they are the new money, because I'm not sure. In this current state of college football, I don't know that there's room for true new money for a true, like, a new team to jump up to being a tier 2 team, or even good to go from 2 to blue blood. I mean, there's a couple programs that I think are kind of thought of as, blue blood adjacent, even if they're not blue bloods. I think you think of a team like a school like Penn State. If you're not considering Penn State a blue blood, they're right there. Oregon at this point, there's a number of programs that are really right on the cusp of being blue bloods, if they're not already essentially blue bloods. But you don't really see a lot of teams that are just rising up now. But Iowa State over the last decade has proven to be a consistent winner. Obviously, they had a down year in 2022 after you have a huge number of departures, including the greatest quarterback in school history. But other than that, Matt Campbell has put together consistent winners. And then you get last year and you have their best season in school history. You win 10 games in the regular season. You go to play for a Big 12 title game. Then you win a Pop-Tart Bowl against a good Miami team. Right now, the stock is as high as it has ever been on Iowa State. And if you have not already been paying attention to Iowa State, which I'll even admit for the first, I would say 7-8 seasons of the Matt Campbell tenure, through the 2020 Fiesta Bowl season and even all that, Iowa State was a fun program to watch, kind of the plucky underdog, but that's really what they were. They were just the plucky underdog. But now you've got the program consistently showing up in the top 20, top 15 in preseason. And they're being projected as being contenders for conference titles, which obviously they have not won one in a long time. But they're being projected as competing near the top most seasons, and will be again this season. I would guess they're probably going to be one of the 2 to 3, probably one of the, I would guess 2 to 4 best favored teams as far as competing for another Big 12 title, along with Kansas State, Arizona State, and maybe TCU. Maybe we'll dig into that more especially after spring practice, once we get a better idea what the rosters look like. But this is your opportunity. If you're not an Iowa State fan or you haven't consistently paid attention to the program to this point, this is a fantastic time to get in on the ground floor, as far as just making Iowa State your second football team. If you don't have a Big 12 football team already to cheer for, this is as good as one of the gets. You have Matt Campbell, who is an elite coach in college football. He's widely respected at all levels, unless you talk to Kansas State and Iowa State fans. Everybody else respects Matt Campbell. He's had a number of opportunities to go to bigger schools, to go to the NFL, and he has not. He has stayed at Iowa State. He has done what a lot of people wish college football coaches would do, which is build the program, stay loyal, build the program, don't chase after money. Everybody expects coaches to do that, to chase the greener pastures, because that's just the norm. So it catches people off guard when you see a good coach that doesn't do that. But Matt Campbell has not done that. He's had plenty of opportunities to do that. And he will continue to have opportunities to do that as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, essentially. But you've got a program at Iowa State that is, I'm biased. Obviously, I have Iowa State up in the corner there. I've got Iowa State all stuff around me. I've got an Iowa State shirt on right now. I am an Iowa State fan and frankly a homer. I'm not afraid to admit that. I think everybody's a homer to a certain extent. And I think not admitting that you're a homer at least a little bit is probably silly if you're a fan of any team. But I believe that Iowa State, the way Iowa State's program operates in modern college football, where you're operating in a smaller conference. I shouldn't even say a smaller conference. I mean, it's not the Big 10 and the SEC in terms of prestige and money, but it's still a power conference. It's still a very good conference, but it's smaller than the two main conferences. So, it's a program that historically is not good. They're one of the worst 10 programs in the Power 5, historically in the Power 5, in the Power 5 actually more one of the bottom 5. Along with Kansas State, Vanderbilt, Indiana, and a few other schools. But right now they're exciting. They've got a young coach. Matt Campbell's going into his 10th season at Iowa State, and he's still only his early 40s. He's still a very young coach with a lot of experience. Iowa State is putting lots of, not just putting players in the NFL that are role players, but putting in very prominent players. I mean, you're looking at a guy like Brock Purdy, who is, I would argue, at least a top 10 quarterback. You could probably, at the height of his powers, maybe argue closer to 5. But he's a top 10 quarterback. He's going to have a contract this offseason that's going to start with a 3 or a 4, probably. Big contract for him. You've got Alan Lazard, who's carved himself out a very nice career with the Packers and the Jets. We'll see where he goes now. You've got Breece Hall, who, when he's healthy, he is a certainly top 5, maybe top 3 running back in the league. If you're looking at running backs in the NFL, you've got Saquon Barkley, And then, you know, you could say maybe Christian McCaffrey, but he's rarely healthy. Derrick Henry's getting old. Maybe Breece Hall is your second best running back in the NFL. But I would say certainly he's at least top 5. Then you've got Xavier Hutchinson, who's had a very nice start to his career with the Texans and is now starting to get really regular rotation player snaps. Will McDonald, who had a nice season for the Jets. You've got Jake Hummel for the Rams. Charlie Kohler on the Ravens had a couple catches this postseason. He's been pretty good. And you've got another group of guys coming into the NFL this year: Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Darian Porter, who all are getting like day 2 pick projections that I would guess will project to be not only on rosters this fall, but will continue to be prominent players in the NFL in the very, very near future. So you've got a young coach. They're winning. It's kind of an upstart program. You certainly will not be labeled a bandwagon fan. Got lots of young guys going in the NFL, lots of young players currently on the roster, which obviously we're going to be talking about over the next couple months. But it's an exciting time to be an Iowa State football fan. The fan base is really, really fun. Like every fan base, I think we can have our times where we're kind of neurotic and just, get over the top. But I think you're going to have that when you have any passionate fan base. We show up, the game day atmosphere is awesome. We tailgate like it's its own professional sport. I would say it's just a really fun college football program right now. And there's a lot of things pointing in the right direction. So if you're not an Iowa State football fan, I'm hoping by the end of the summer, by the time Iowa State kicks off against Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland in the middle of August, that Iowa State will be your second favorite football team. So we're going to get started on this, and we are going to start with the quarterbacks. So this has been a position at Iowa State under Matt Campbell that has had a kind of it was rocky early because the quarterback position was just not well recruited. It wasn't particularly stable when Matt Campbell got here. There was not a clear-cut starter or a clear-cut future of the program. So it took a couple years to get there. Really just one and a half. But since the middle of the 2017 season, when Kyle Kempt went down to Norman, Oklahoma, and beat Baker Mayfield on the road, ever since then, Iowa State has had pretty remarkable stability at the quarterback position. Obviously, the main reason for that is Brock Purdy and now Rocco Becht. Brock Purdy started his, I think, the 4th or 5th game of his freshman season and played every single snap, played every single game, not quite every single snap, but every single game, started every single game from then on till the end of his senior season, and was the best quarterback in school history. Everybody knows who Brock Purdy is at this point. I don't need to explain to you who Brock Purdy is. But then you follow that up. You have 1 year of Hunter Deckers, where he's just kind of you can see the raw talent there, but it just the mental side of the game never really clicked. It never caught up to his physical attributes. And then you have the whole gambling thing comes out, and he just kind of falls out of favor with the program and transfers to Iowa Western, where he has a couple good seasons and now is currently an NFL draft prospect. Then, so in 2023, as a redshirt freshman, Rocco Becht, son of former West Virginia tight end and former Rams NFL tight end, St. Louis Rams tight end Anthony Becht, comes in as a redshirt freshman and has one of the best freshman seasons in school history and frankly in Big 12 football history. Is efficient, does a nice job commanding the offense. He doesn't always, there's times where he still acts like a freshman. He throws a bad ball here or there, but he kept his turnovers down and really just kind of game managed Iowa State to a pretty respectable season, and one especially that I think exceeded the expectations of a lot of people because of the gambling probe kind of upsetting the apple cart a little bit as far as the offseason, the vibes of the offseason, which I know is kind of a nebulous phrase to use, but you lose your starting quarterback, you lose a defensive lineman, you lose a couple other guys. And things just there's a kind of a dark cloud hanging over the program. So to have a redshirt freshman come in and really just have an awesome season, a very good, efficient season. And I would say won a decent chunk of games, and he got better as the season went on. You really couldn't ask for any more as far as him as a redshirt freshman. So you come into this season. When actually the interesting part about that quarterback battle too was there was a thought because there was a thought that Rocco might not start because incoming into the coming into the 2023 season, Iowa State had a true freshman on the roster named JJ Cole, who was a mid 4-star recruit, one of the best recruits in the in the history of the state of Iowa, especially one of the best quarterback recruits. Came in and he was a true freshman, and people didn't really know how game ready he was, but they knew he was a mid 4-star guy, so very highly touted guy that had offers to go all over the place. Was an elite 11 guy. He's like 6'5", 6'6", huge guy, big frame. Didn't really know exactly how ready he was, but as we got closer and closer to the season, it got. Hold on one second. My dog is up on my wife's office chair doing something. Oh, go get down. Off. Anyways, apologize for that. So you go into that season and there's a thought that JJ Cole is going to potentially take that starting spot. But as we got closer and closer to the season, it became more and more apparent that Rocco Becht was just going to get he's going to get the nod because he'd been in the program for a year. He was more familiar with the playbook and was just more ready to play. And we had really not seen basically any of him up to that point. I don't even know if he might have taken a couple snaps during his redshirt year, but for the most part, had played essentially zero football up to that point in front of Iowa State fans' eyes. So a little bit of concern, obviously, when you're starting a freshman, but frankly, you didn't have any other options. You either had a true freshman or a redshirt freshman, and that's just kind of what it was. Rocco on the job, had a great season. It was never in doubt that he was going to keep the job and run away with it. So now you're coming into 2024, this past season, where Rocco is a redshirt sophomore, and he is expected to take a nice jump forward and really cement himself as a top tier quarterback in the conference and become nationally prominent, because he was showing a lot of the same attributes that a young Brock Purdy did, I would say, especially like Rocco's freshman season looked fairly similar to Brock's 2019 season. So his sophomore season, 2018, Brock was fairly chaotic. He was pump faking 5 yards downfield and faking guys out. He was somewhat chaotic. He was really good, but he was somewhat chaotic his freshman year. And then his sophomore season, which was his most productive season statistically, he was much more calm in the pocket, not doing as much goofy stuff. But then you get to Rocco's sophomore season, 2024. It starts out with a bang. First play of the game, he throws a deep bomb to Jalen Knoll, who catches it in traffic for like 60 something yards. And it was a great play. He started off the season really well, but then you get, it's kind of an interesting, the 2024 season had this whole storyline here where you have all these injuries that start piling up, especially on defense. And while it's not Rocco getting injured, it's not quarterbacks getting injured, it's not even like offensive line, it's not the people around him getting injured. But when the defense is getting so banged up, you're having to win games less on the back of your defense and more on the back of your offense. And as the season goes on and they're 6-0, they're 7-0, and they're in the top 10, injuries keep piling up. You have a bye week. You have a bye week right before you play UCF, and everyone's like, okay, this is our chance to get healthy. We're 7-0. We made it to the bye week undefeated. You've got a UCF team that's kind of struggling right now. You can get a little bit healthy. You go into UCF, and UCF starts punching you in the mouth in the running game. They are moving the ball downfield with really not even trying to throw the ball. They're running read options with a couple different quarterbacks. They're giving out the obviously defense a lot of problems. Not only that, but Rocco is now, because the defense isn't necessarily just holding the UCF offense back, Rocco is starting to try to do too much. And he throws not one, but 2 pick sixes to Central Florida throughout this game. And Iowa State is in deep, deep trouble. They're down a couple scores going into the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, the light switches on. And we find out that fourth quarter Rocco is that if you had to choose between having fourth quarter Rocco or fourth quarter Brock Purdy, you're taking fourth quarter Rocco. And frankly, there's not a lot of quarterbacks in college football that I don't think Iowa State fans would have taken over fourth quarter Rocco Becht. If the game's on the line, you want Rocco Becht on your team because that dude is unbelievably clutch. In that game, in that UCF game, multiple times he tucks it and runs, picks up 10, 15, 10, 15 yards on the ground, runs around people, runs through people, just picking up really tough first downs to keep the drive moving. Then they eventually, the drive is capped off after Rocco runs a QB keeper into the end zone and finishes the drive off, then runs another QB keeper to get the 2-point conversion to go up 3, and then they obviously win that game. But as fun as that game was, and as fun as like monumental as that fourth quarter drive was, what we didn't know at the time was that game was sort of a harbinger of what was kind of to come for the rest of the regular season, where you get these performances where Rocco is kind of inconsistent or a little bit turnover prone for the first 3 quarters of a game. And then when the game's close, late, then all of a sudden he turns it on and he turns into Joe Montana. Actually, not Joe Montana. Joe Montana couldn't run like Rocco can, but he turns into this really super efficient runner. He's throwing good passes. He's making really tough runs and doing a really great job just keeping the ball moving downfield. But it was kind of one of those things where you appreciate the heroics in the fourth quarter, but if he had not thrown 2 pick sixes before that, you didn't need the heroics. So it was kind of it was a lot of up and down performances for Rocco. And a lot of that was because he was sort of having to play a little bit of hero ball just to make up for the fact that the defense was just gassed and completely drained. They were so banged up at linebacker, at safety, on the defensive line, that they were hanging on to do their best they can, but the offense was going to have to win those games for him. So Rocco kind of at times forced the ball too much. Some of the play calling didn't do him a ton of favors, where you're making him throw like 3-yard out routes or 5-yard out routes to the wide side of the field, which is one of the hardest throws in football for a quarterback. Is to just get enough zip on that so that way you can get it outside without leaving it low enough where a corner can jump it and take it to the house, which is exactly what Central Florida did. Versed them a couple times, but it was really that it was not just interceptions that he was throwing, but it was pick sixes. They were kept turning into touchdowns. And when you have that many passes coming back and just giving the other team points, that makes it really hard to keep winning games. And eventually it did come back to bite them. They lost a couple games in the regular season, but you lose to Texas Tech at home. Now, granted, that game, the defense had done such a good job, and then the last drive of the fourth quarter is when they finally broke. But that game, the offense was okay, but not great. They turned the ball over a couple times, and it just wasn't a good, clean game. And they should have won that game. But all in all, Rocco has a good 2024 season, but it's just the sudden flip into being being turnover prone, frankly, in the second half of the season was troubling, I think, for me. And he didn't turn the ball over against Miami, but had a hell of a time against Arizona State, who was just blitzing him to no end. And I don't think that's a long-term pattern, but it's hard to say because right now all we have to go on is that he was playing a little bit of hero ball to try to make up for the fact that the defense was so banged up. Now that the defense is healthy and you got some other playmakers around you, does he feel the need to try to play hero ball as much? You wouldn't think so, but the main point for Rocco is to going in next season is to just cut down on the turnovers and make sure that you're not giving the team, and especially if you're going to turn it over, I guess, don't put it in a position where the other team can run it back for a touchdown and get free points off of you. So, but all that to be said, that I expect Rocco to be very good this year. I mean, he's no doubt the starter. But I expect him to be very good this year, and I expect him to take a step forward. And I think he's capable of doing that. Is he the prototypical physical specimen of a quarterback? Not necessarily. He's 6 foot. He's average height. A decent arm, throws a decent deep ball, but doesn't have like elite arm talent necessarily. But he's just a good smart quarterback. shares a lot of traits with Brock Purdy and just being a gamer that goes out and makes plays and gets stuff done. Is a guy that the team rallies around, things like that. He's a guy you want in charge of your program. Just you'd like to see him cut down the turnovers a little bit, and that's other than that, he's what Iowa State wants in their quarterback. Backing him up this season is going to be Connor Moberly, who was a true freshman last year from Southeast Polk, and who we found out essentially that he jumped JJ Cole in the depth chart too. So JJ Cole, the former mid 4-star guy, was now not even the backup. In his limited snaps, his freshman season, he looked jumpy. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket. Sometimes he ran it a little too quickly. Just didn't look like it looked like the game was too fast for him. And then eventually, then you come into this season and now you've got Connor Moberly taking the backup snaps instead of JJ Cole. So you're like, well, okay, so JJ is probably going to be transferring out, and transfer out JJ did. That was not unexpected. I think everybody knew that was coming. As soon as we started seeing Connor Moberly get backup snaps ahead of JJ, we knew that was coming. I believe he ended up at Appalachian State. So, hopefully that works out for him. He deserves it. He deserves an opportunity to play, but it's kind of one of those where he just got stuck behind a good player. And that's just what it was. Even if he was the backup, you're still waiting for Rocco to be done. And, assuming Rocco stays through next season, stays through his senior season, JJ's got one more year to play. And in this age of college football, that's just not how it works. Guys don't sit on the bench for 4 years and then wait to play and just get 1 year as a senior to play. That's just not how college football works. And that's okay. JJ is certainly welcome to go, he was certainly welcome to go pursue playing, opportunities to get more playing time. I don't know what Appalachian State's QB situation looks like. I would assume he's going there with the expectation that he can compete to be a starter, but that was just not really in the cards for him at Iowa State, sans a bunch of injuries. And part of the reason also there, and this is kind of the last little section of our quarterbacks here, is that they brought in a new guy in Alex Mansky, who is a high 3-star recruit, I believe. Was an Elite 11 quarterback out of Algona, Iowa. So getting another in-state kid. He's got a really interesting skill set. I think he's got the right size for it. I'm going to take a couple peeks at his huddle tape here. This is just his junior season. He had elbow surgery this past season. So he will not, don't think he'll be throwing in spring practice or anything like this, but he's got good prototypical size. I like to see it. His mechanics are pretty good. His footwork looks nice. Throws a nice deep ball there right in stride. Didn't underthrow the guy at all. You watch him, he seems, some good elusiveness there. Now, granted, the deal with high school guys is always what does their high school, their competition tell you? Because, you get these guys that pretty much every Division I athlete in general, any athlete that's good enough to play in the Power 5 is going to look really, really good in high school. Even at the 6A level in Texas, if you're at Texas 6A football, Division I players just stand out from the rest. They just do. And then you get to, North Central Iowa, Algona, or not North Central, but when you get to, Central and Western Iowa, Algona is not playing, they're not playing. This isn't this is an FCS football. This is a lower level of football in which, the great athletes are going to stand out. And so it's the same question that every high school kid has, they have to evaluate on is this kid going to be able to make the same plays in high school? But if you're looking at these throws, especially if you look at that last one, it's not like he's running over people, running past people. If you look at this throw here, this is a throw that is in Iowa State's scheme. Just a guy running up the seam, from a tight end spot, a slot spot, and just look at this throw right there. Just perfectly right in the breadbasket, right in stride. That's the kind of throw that Iowa State is going to ask its quarterbacks to make. So when you're watching this tape and you look at Alex Mansky and say, this is a really interesting guy. He makes that's an RPO action to the seam. That's a very common throw in Iowa State's offense. Look right here again. He's moving around. He's elusive. He's not necessarily going to be burn you with his legs, but does a good job extending the play. Finds a guy, and this is a guy I'm really excited about. I don't know. Like I said, he had elbow surgery this past season, so that he's. I mean, he's not going to play this. He's not going to play this spring for sure. I would be pretty shocked if he was, the backup on the depth chart. I would assume he'll be third, and with virtually no chance of playing this season, and that's totally okay because you've got Rocco for another 2 seasons, and then Connor Mobley is still on the depth chart. So, but this is a guy that if you're looking at 2027 and beyond, I think this is a guy that's going to be competing for that starting spot with Connor Mobley in 2027. And I'm really excited about this guy. So, when you look at the case of like JJ Cole, this got to be a sticky situation for JJ because he was just going to be stuck, behind Rocco for another couple of years, and then in 2027 he was going to have to compete with not only Connor Mobley but Alex Mansky, who will have been in the program for 2 years at that point and will be a redshirt sophomore. So, it is a tough spot. Don't blame JJ for leaving at all. But currently I'm very I have a very positive outlook on the quarterback position for Iowa State right now. Very optimistic about it because you've got some good young talent. You've got an established starter that you feel great about for the next 2 years. And then behind those, you got some really talented young guys that should develop nicely going into that. So I think this is a really good, solid position group, as it has been for Matt Campbell. We've just been honestly really kind of blessed with great quarterback play for most of the last decade after not really having good quarterback play at all during the Paul Rhodes era and even during the Gene Chizik era. Maybe towards the end with Brett, you had Brett Meyer for the first year of Gene Chizik. But still still a little rough, for most of the decade where Paul Rhodes was there. Pretty rough quarterback play. So it's nice to have that position solidified on a year in, year out basis. So let's go ahead and move to the running backs. This is another position group that, generally speaking, under Matt Campbell has been a very consistent group, highlighted by a couple major NFL players, David Montgomery and Breece Hall, who were back to back. You had Dave Montgomery, and then the beginning of 2019, Breece Hall, he leaves after the 2018 season. The beginning of the 2019 season, Breece Hall comes in, doesn't start right away, but he gets carries in the first few games, and then by the time he gets to West Virginia, he's the full-blown starter and never relinquishes that role until he leaves after his junior season, after the 2020 season. So, you've had good, consistent talent there for a while, and then a couple years were a little dry. There was it was kind of a running back by committee with no real alpha dog there or anything. And especially in then 2023, the running game was pretty poor. They had a number of guys that were very mediocre at best. Then last year in 2023, 2 years ago now, in 2023, you had Abu Sama break out as kind of a true freshman. And started getting he started getting starts towards the end of the season, had a couple of really explosive games against Kansas State and BYU, and played really, really well. But then he gets at the Liberty Bowl, and the running game has 0 yards. I would say rushed for 0 yards against Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. But Rocco broke the single game passing record. So funny how that works. But then you get to 2024, and we're like, well, okay, Abu Sam is the guy, but Carson Hansen is also there. You have some interesting names. You have those two guys for sure. And then beyond that, you've got true freshman Dylan Lee, who we don't know exactly what we're going to do with, but he's an interesting player. He's got good high school tape. You get the season, you start with Abu Sama, and actually you've also got a transfer in of Jalen Jackson, a guy from Eastern Michigan, short guy, 5'8", 5'7", 5'7", 5'8" on a tall day. Kind of a really explosive athlete that's really elusive. So you've got 4 guys coming into that room that you are going to get. They're going to distribute these carries somehow with those 4 guys. Abu Sam was the first guy getting carries, and he's okay. You can still tell he's a great athlete, but he's still just not there as a true an expert in his craft, as far as reading blocking schemes and reading running lanes and doing a good job finding space and then or getting himself into space and knowing when to bounce out, when to stay inside. He's still just not quite getting. He's not good at finding the hole or pacing himself there too to make sure he's hitting the hole at the right time. Not always the best at that. But Carson Hansen's also coming in. He's a little bit different running back. He's not as necessarily as elusive as Abu Sama, and he's not necessarily the home run hitter that Abu Sama is, but he's a great downhill back that you can get if you can get him between the tackles and get him a lane to run. He'll get you 10 yards and then you go from there. He can break, he can run somebody over. Um, he can't get the long run, but I said he's not quite as explosive as Abu Sama is. And you get to the Baylor game, and Jalen Jackson all of a sudden has a breakout game. He has like 130 yards or something like that. And you can see his elusiveness. So then the next couple games, he gets like starter snaps and he's kind of bad. Just didn't work out. He wasn't having he wasn't successful in getting upfield. If you were asking Jalen Jackson to make a guy or two miss in the open field, he's got it. But if you're asking him to really read blocking schemes and read gap assignments and follow blockers through holes, he just wasn't very good. It wasn't patient enough. And he wasn't good at exploding through running lanes in the line. However, as the season goes on, you see Carson Hansen creep up again. And Carson Hansen is getting a lot more carries. They're finding more ways to get him downhill. And then you start really seeing him start to flourish towards the end of the season. And you can see that he does have the athleticism there. He came out of a flex bone offense in Minnesota, which apparently that offense is kind of the scourge of a lot of these mid divisions in Minnesota because tons of them run that. But he came out of a flex bone offense, which is designed to get running backs downhill. And when you could get Carson Hansen running downhill through an A gap or a B gap, whatever it is, with a lead blocker, like an H back, like a Steve O'Klotz or something like that, he is really, really effective. He will just plow forward and get you 8-10 yards. He can do that, and he can do that on a consistent basis. And we also saw some explosiveness from him too, where you get him a little bit of room to run, and he can run past a guy and get to the end zone. We saw that against UCF. So it was nice to see him. So, as the season went on, Carson Hansen definitely established himself as more of the consistent starter and appeared to be this guy that's going to get, he's going to get more carries than the rest of them. I say in the past with when you have guys like Breece Hall and David Montgomery, you can have an alpha dog. You can have a guy that just sit there. He can be your workhorse, your bell cow that gets 25 carries a game. Carson Hansen's still probably not a 25 carries a game kind of guy, but he can be a 15 to 20 guy pretty easily. He's got the body for it. He's physical enough to do it. His running style lends him to doing that. So going into this coming season, I would expect he'll be the starter at the position unless someone really, has a big time spring. Maybe Abu Sama has a big breakout spring and finally the light really comes on for him and he's not just a explosive athlete. And you lose Jalen Jackson to graduation. The next guy, then you have Dylan Lee coming off a red shirt, which is interesting. He really didn't play. He got a few carries, last season, but they were kind of garbage time carries at the goal line, things like that. So he really wasn't asked to do much. He didn't need to do much, and that's okay. But his high school tape looks good, and he seems like it'd be an interesting option there. The incoming guy, which I'm very excited for, his name, I believe his name is pronounced River, but it's Ryver, but I believe it's River Peppers is his name. That's how you pronounce that. So I'm going to pull him up just so you can kind of check it out. This is a guy I'm really, really interested in because he seems like he follows a similar mold to what we see a lot of out of Matt Campbell's running backs here. So you'll see him obviously here. He'll get circled because we're on huddle, but you see some of this, a lot of this in Carson Hansen's tape where he gets uphill and then just makes a guy miss and then pulls down. But he's got, you see some long speed there running past guys. This is, he is from Independence, Missouri. So just outside Kansas City, which is that's an area that Iowa State has really hammered the Kansas City area. But you see right there, it's a nice tough run inside and then has the speed to pull away. I don't know if this is the most elite competition, but he's still looking like a guy, good vision there, and then just has the wherewithal to just get upfield, get past guys, and then just finish out the run. I mean, right there, he's pulling away from a guy at the end. This is, it's a guy I would say has typically not played true freshmen at running back very often unless they are true like breakout stars and there's a clear vacancy there. There is not a clear vacancy at running back this year. Carson Hansen feels like a very good option one. And Dylan Lee or Abu Sama, whatever is going on there, you'll have a couple guys there at the top at least. But gosh, if you look at this kid's tape, I mean, he is explosive. I mean, the kid's a home run threat. I mean, and I understand that these are huddle highlights. I mean, they're intended to be, these are intended to be the kid's best plays. But I mean, all of these plays are like 70-yard runs. I mean, they're stacking the box. They've got 8 guys in the box right now, or 7 guys in the box trying to stop this kid, and they're run blitzing him on the edge. He's just doing a nice job, and then just bang, he's gone. There's really no hope. The safety took a pretty good angle there, as good angle as he could, and just straight about ran him. Kid's a nice athlete, and he's a home run threat. I think this is a kid that's has a chance to be really, really good for Iowa State. We'll see. I haven't seen much in his highlights so far as as it relates to catching the ball, but modern running backs in general are typically pretty decent at catching the ball because most offenses anymore require offenses to be able to catch, or most offenses now require running backs to be some sort of pass catching option. And I don't think, I don't think Iowa State would have taken a flyer on a guy that couldn't catch a pass. It's hard not to look at this. It's hard not to watch this and be excited for what this kid can bring. I don't know if he plays next year. Like I said, you got a couple options at top with Carson Hansen and Dylan Lee and Abu Sama. I've mentioned before on this stream that I think there's an outside shot that Abu Sama flips over to corner to fill that. Because he was actually coming out of high school. A lot of schools, and Iowa State included, wanted to put him at corner, but they just said, well, we're just going to try him out at running back and see what happens. And obviously he was, explosive at running back. And they're like, well, damn, we can get this kid going. And his freshman year had lots of explosive plays. Last year, he even had a good chunk of explosive plays, but just was never quite the consistent bell cow you kind of were hoping him to be by right now. And that's not to say that he can't be. It's not to say that he can't, this offseason really turn the corner and turn into the really high end elite back that we think he think he can be. But I would say it's also got a vacancy at the second corner spot. And maybe you look at Abu Sama there. There's precedent there for turning offensive players into corners with Darian Porter. It's an interesting conversation to have, especially when you've got, you feel good about Dylan Lee, and then you got this kid coming in. It's hard not to watch this and be excited. And right there, he's fighting through a couple different tackles on that play. And running back's always a tough one. And he's lined up on the slot on this one, so I guess we're gonna see some pass catching chops here. Run right past the guy, make a nice catch in traffic there. I mean, I'm sure it's one where he can work on his route running a little bit. Like there, on that route, he just kind of ran through the seam. He didn't really have to do a whole lot, but good adjustment there on that catch. I mean, this kid's really talented. I'm very excited for River Peppers. I think he's going to be a really interesting player to look at going forward. So the future of that running back spot, I think, is bright. They've got some good guys in the room right now. Another guy that got a couple carries, he got meaningful carries last year. Not only in the regular season, but got some even in the Pop-Tart Bowl, was Aiden Floro, who was a walk-on, I believe, from Adele and from a high school called ADM. And he got carries and had, I think, a couple scores this season. I don't know what the plan is with him. I mean, I would, with the roster change, with the roster sizes changing and the scholarships changing, no matter what happens in the spring, you're just going to have to lose guys. I mean, there's just not enough roster spots to keep everybody on the roster. Especially, honestly, it sucks because the guys that are going to suffer the most are the walk-ons. Walk-on programs across the country are going to be trimmed down quite a bit. But there's gonna eventually they're gonna have to make room for guys, or they're gonna have to get guys off the roster because they just can't keep that many on there. So I don't know if that means that Aiden Flora is. I don't know if that means that Aiden Flora is going to be a victim of that, or if that means he can, carve out a spot because he did get some decent snaps last year, even as a redshirt or even as a walk-on running back. When you've got four other running backs in that room that are on scholarship, I'm not sure exactly what that looks like for him. He's still on the roster. He has not transferred yet, so I'm sure he and or the program both believe there's a future there for him to do something. So that'll be an interesting situation situation to monitor there. No matter what, you've got a good stable of bodies there. I think that are really exciting going into next season. And as with most running games, it's great to have a good running back on the roster, but in the end, your offensive line's got to be there. And there are questions to be answered for the Iowa State offensive line. They were decent last year, but you lost Jalen Travis, you lost your left tackle, and it's just a guy that that's a position group that has been inconsistent for Iowa State in the Matt Campbell era. They've got talent there, but they've Coach Ryan Clanton's got to keep developing that. Brendan Black will be a junior this year. You expect him to really be at this point, you expect him to be like an elite road grader at running in the running game, and to keep that whole group moving forward. So it's an interesting group. The personnel there is fine, but we got to see what the running game looks like holistically as far as the scheme and the run and the offensive line goes too. So that has been our state of the program for quarterbacks and running backs in the program this week. I think both of them are promising. They've got established starters going into next season with Rocco Beck and then Carson Hansen and Dylan Lee and Abu Sama and maybe even River Peppers that we were just looking at. A lot of really interesting players that all do something unique and different. And I think this is a good foundation to build upon. I think next week we will get into the receivers and tight ends. So get into all the rest of the pass catchers. And then I think the following week, the next day of the program thing, we'll do the offensive and defensive line. So we'll go into the trenches, and I may try to get somebody on here that is kind of more of an O-line expert than I am. I with offensive line stuff, I know what I'm looking at, but for anybody that really watches college football, you probably are aware that there are offensive line guys and there are other people. There are people that are just true offensive line and defensive line nerds. That's what they pay attention to. There could be a Heisman quarterback, Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback on the field, but these guys are watching the offensive line the whole time. I'm going to see if I can get somebody like that. I know a couple people that are like that. I'm going to see if I can get them on to help really break down the offensive line as far as personnel, scheme, things like that, and what that looks like going forward as well. But appreciate everybody tuning in. I think this is it's an exciting program right now, and I think it's going to be going forward. Keep reviewing some of these state of the program stuff, and I'm working on getting an interview guest right now that I'm very, very excited about. They've said yes, just got to get a date and time figured out. So keep an eye out for that. I will announce that maybe as early as next week. We'll see. But everybody, thank you for tuning in. For any Iowa State fans that are willing to tune in during the Iowa State Oklahoma State basketball game, thank you. For any non-Iowa State fans, really appreciate it. Like I said, my goal is that by the time we get to the middle of August and Iowa State's kicking off in Dublin, that Iowa State will be your second favorite football team to watch, or at least your favorite Big 12 team to watch. So thank you, everybody, for watching. We will be back again next week with Pass Catchers and right here at Iowa State Cyclones Live on the Voice of College Football Network. Thanks.